Translation exposure, sometimes referred to as accounting exposure, arises whenever a multinational corporation, an MNC, translates the financial statements of its foreign subsidiaries that are maintained in a foreign currency into its domestic or reporting currency equivalent. This is necessary to enable the MNC parent to present the consolidated financial statement of its global operations. The process of translation is very simple. 1. The financial statements of the foreign subsidiary expressed in a foreign currency are to be restated in the parent company's reporting currency. 2. If the same exchange rate is used when translating all lines in the balance sheet, there would be no imbalance. In other words, total assets will be equal to total liabilities. However, there is a strong business case to use different exchange rates for different line items. For example, it seems logical to use current exchange rates when translating current assets and current liabilities, revenue and expenditure, and historical exchange rates for line items such as equity capital, fixed assets, and so on. The use of different exchange rates in the translation, as you can imagine, creates an imbalance in the translated balance sheet. That means total assets not being equal to total liabilities. How that imbalance is treated and accounted for is at the core of managing translation exposure. Broadly, 4 methods are used to translate the financial statements of foreign subsidiaries. 1. Current non-current method. 2. Monetary non-monetary method. 3. Temporal method. And 4. Current rate method. In the next few minutes, we will look at the differences in these 4 methods and capture them sequentially in a spreadsheet. First, current non-current method. This method of translation works on the basis that assets and liabilities should be translated based on their maturity. For example, current assets and current liabilities are short-term in nature and therefore should be translated at the spot exchange rates, and non-current assets and liabilities such as fixed assets, owner's equity, etc. should be translated at the historical exchange rate that prevailed when that item was first recorded on the balance sheet. As you can see from the spreadsheet on your screen now, long-term assets such as net fixed assets, long-term debt, equity stock, etc. are translated at the historic exchange rate of USD/CCU 30.00, whereas current assets such as inventories and current liabilities are translated at the current exchange rate of USD/CCU 20.00. The effective gain or loss from the translation is reflected either as an increase or a decrease in the retained earnings. That is, if the translation results in a net gain, it will reflect as an increase, and a net loss as a decrease in the retained earnings of the MNC. This method of translation was extensively used until mid to late 70s, but over time has rapidly given way to more sophisticated methods driven primarily by the need to implement more robust and consistent accounting standards across the world. The second method of translation is the monetary non-monetary method. In this method, all balance sheet items that represent a sum of money, that means items whose value changes as the exchange rate changes, and hence they are called monetary in nature, such as cash, debt, current liabilities, etc., are translated at the current exchange rate. All other items on the balance sheet, such as equity, stock, land, etc., are considered to be non-monetary in nature and hence translated at the historical exchange rate that prevailed when the item was first recorded on the balance sheet. As in the previous method, the gain or loss arising from translation effectively increases or decreases the retained earnings. The third method is the temporal method. This is a very popular translation method adopted by several MNCs. In this method, specific assets are translated at exchange rates that are in line with the point in time when that asset was created. That is, items in the balance sheet that are shown at their current value are translated at the spot exchange rate, and items that are carried at historical cost are translated at historical exchange rates. For example, as you can see from the spreadsheet, cash is translated at the current exchange rate, and value of inventory is translated at the average exchange rate over the period. And as in the previous method, the gain or loss arising from translation effectively increases or decreases the retained earnings. And finally, the current rate method. Current rate method is perhaps the most commonly used method for translation. All line items in the balance sheet except owner's equity or stockholder's equity are translated at current exchange rate as shown in the spreadsheet. Importantly, the profit or loss from the translation is not adjusted against the retained earnings in the balance sheet, but is carried as a separate balance sheet item titled Cumulative Translation Adjustments. For this reason, firms prefer to use the current rate method because profits or losses from translation will not impact the current year's profits or retained earnings. Rapid globalization and significant increase in multinational corporations that are domiciled in several countries around the world has accentuated the issues associated with accounting for profits or losses arising from translation. With a view to bring about standardization across the globe, IAS 21, which specifically lays down the translation guidelines, have been issued under the International Financial Reporting Standards. The technical summary of IAS 21 can be found in the web link after this video.